Hello everyone, many thanks for joining this webinar. I'm Warren Butler, Marketing Director at Preact, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Simon Shaw, who will be leading today's presentation to demonstrate the unified interface for Microsoft Dynamics 365. After the initial introductions, we'll be covering 8 reasons why Dynamics 365 online customers should be actively looking at the new unified experience and planning to migrate from the classic web browser interface. A quick summary about Preact. We are a Microsoft Gold partner helping small and mid-sized businesses and enterprise teams implement and support Dynamics 365 across customer engagement apps and solutions on the Microsoft Power Platform. Trading since 1993, today we support more than 8,000 Dynamics users across a variety of industry sectors. As one of just 60 partners worldwide named in the prestigious 2019 Inner Circle for Dynamics, this puts Preact into the top 1% bracket of Microsoft's partners. If you're looking to do more with the product, please do get in touch and we'll be delighted to discuss your plans and offer advice. Before moving to the demonstration, let's start by explaining what the unified interface is and why Microsoft has introduced this. A significant factor behind this development has been the need to address inconsistent user experiences across different devices and screens. In comparing the Dynamics 365 interface across a desktop browser, through a mobile app, or within Outlook, there was an obvious divergence between the available functions, as well as significant layout variations and inconsistencies for different screen sizes. With Dynamics becoming more app-centric and the drive towards the implementation of connected, diverse apps that handle different work streams, it's important that these apps only need to be designed once and quickly shared, as opposed to developing and maintaining various forms across multiple entities. Microsoft's answer has been to introduce the unified interface, which uses a responsive web design to make Dynamics 365 portable so that records and forms reflow to fit any screen. To achieve this consistency, the foundation for the unified interface is a new PowerApps component framework, which now comes into play. Essentially, this is a building block for all new form components. One of the enhancements this enables is the ability to add custom controls, which Simon will feature shortly. But it's also the framework that enables the deployment of other custom components such as embedded Power Apps and embedded Power BI dashboards. Within the unified interface, every control is built using the PowerApps framework, and this is also the framework that developers can build, package and deploy their own custom components. The new interface is already in use for Dynamics 365 mobile apps and within Outlook, and it's also the default experience for new instances of Dynamics. The new UI was introduced in 2017 with the rollout of version 9.0. But at the current time, relatively few Dynamics users are using this from their desktop or laptop, as the classic web browser remains in place for the vast majority of instances. And that's because critical functionality gaps had existed between the old and new interfaces for this initial release, where some familiar Dynamics processes and functions weren't available within the unified interface, and that proved an obvious barrier to adoption. These gaps have now largely closed following subsequent Microsoft updates, and as a result we are starting to see a significant upturn in clients who are now looking to enable the new experience. So that brings up the first of our 8 reasons why administrators should now be preparing to migrate to the unified interface. And that is simply that the unified interface is the future for the product. Microsoft's stated goal is to make this the only client interface for all Dynamics 365 customer engagement apps. This is reinforced in its April 29 release notes for Dynamics and the Power Platform, which says that the unified interface now provides the mainline experience for the common data service where Dynamics data is stored. Whereas discussions tended to be about what features were missing, this has now been reversed as fresh capabilities are continually being added to the new interface, and the crucial point here is that these are exclusively available for the unified interface, so the legacy web browser UI is now starting to fall behind. As a result, there is a growing gap between these two as Microsoft's product development is heavily concentrated on the new experience. We must acknowledge that this doesn't automatically mean that the unified interface is the right solution for every customer scenario at the current time, but we do believe that a tipping point has been reached. In most cases, this does now provide users with an improved experience through additional controls and extended capabilities that haven't previously been possible in Dynamics, certainly not without significant development. Today, the classic web UI and the new interface coexists within the product, but Microsoft has signaled that at some future point it will switch off this side-by-side arrangement and migrate all Dynamics instances across to the unified interface. The timing of this hasn't yet been announced, and as at least 12 months notice would be expected, the removal of the classic web interface isn't imminent, but this is certainly something that every administrator should be aware of and planning for. While all Dynamics instances will be moved on to the new interface at some future point, the aim of this presentation is to help your organisation determine what benefits you'd gain by enabling the new experience now. So that's the cue for me to hand over to Simon, who will walk you through the main demonstration, beginning with the second reason in our series, which is the responsive design of the unified interface. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Warren. So I hope everyone can see my screen okay. What I'd like to do is begin the demonstration on the unified interface by looking at the responsive design and how this renders in different environments. So I would like to show how this renders in the Dynamics app for Outlook and in the browser and also on the mobile client. So what I'd first like to do is, you can see on my screen that I have an inquiry from someone. And basically I'm going to push this into the database and then show you how that record then renders across all devices. So when we get an email like this, what Dynamics will go and do is automatically check the email address and see if it matches with anyone else in the database. So as you can see from this, it's an unknown recipient. So what we can now do is we can add this person into the database, and we can choose to add them as either a contact or a lead. So a contact would be it's someone who works for an organisation that we're already working with, perhaps they're a customer, and this is just a new contact we haven't yet had contact with. Or we can add them as a lead, which would be a brand new inquiry and someone we haven't been dealing with. So in this instance, this looks like someone we don't know who it is, so I'm going to add this person in as a lead. So you can customize these forms to capture whatever information you require. So this one I've got is fairly basic, so customer want would be ink purchase. First name, last name, you'll notice this has pulled this across automatically from the Office 365 account as myself. And there isn't a company name, but we could add the company name in there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save and close that. So you'll see what this has done, and this will push this email into the database and track it against that lead we've just created. So now we've seen how to track an email into Dynamics, but I just want to show you now what that record then looks like for how that is then rendered on multiple devices. So going away from this, I'm just going to drag across my phone screen. So I'm currently running this on Android, but this also works on iOS and Windows applications as well. And essentially what I can do is I'm going to go into the lead that I've just created in here. So there you go, leads open this week, and you can see how this renders. So I can see there's my person. You see, look, it's quite quick as well, nice and responsive. And that's all the details we've just captured. So there's the topic I just entered, name and phone number. So I'm just going to now flip across to the browser version so you can see how it renders on the computer. So again, I'm going to look at leads open this week. There we go. There you go, you can see the forms loading. So you'll notice there's some additional features that you didn't see on my phone here, such as this element here, which I'm going to talk about in just a few minutes. What I want to talk about next, really, is sort of to do with sort of navigation and how this all looks. For those of you who've already been using Dynamics in the classic interface, you'll notice that rather than have everything across the top of the page, this is now in a bar on the left-hand side. And what you can do with this is you can pop this in or out, so you can maximize your screen space for forms. So with this, it's basically running as a model-driven application. So the idea is rather than having one interface for everyone and then controlling what people can see via permissions, which can still leave you with quite messy sitemaps, the model-driven applications is designed that we can build an application for a person. So if they're a salesperson, they have a sales app, and vice versa for sort of other roles. And this allows us to control what they see, what entities they see, and makes it much easier to navigate. So you'll notice a couple of other things. So we've got things like recent. So when I've been on a recent thing, so I've just been on this record here, but you can see I can very quickly navigate using this tab. And we can also pin these as well. So if there's a specific person I'm dealing with on a day, I can pin this. So it will always appear at the top. And we also have a pinned section here as well. So you'll notice the way that this is split down. This is categorized, so you've got my work, so where your dashboards and activities started, customers, so accounts and contacts, and then this is where I have all the sales entities, so playbooks, opportunities, competitors, etc. So you might also notice a couple of other bits with this. You'll notice that the shape and feel of the business process flows across the top has changed. So the functionality is still fairly similar, but rather than this being permanently popped out, you can set it so every time you click on a stage, it just has those queries that you've set on the business process flow here, rather than having them taking up lots of space on the page. And as part of this, we can also pin these out. And again, this will then allow us to quickly navigate this record, and this will permanently stay at the top of the page. Also, people will notice that rather than having tabs in the old style sense, where it was essentially one massive form and you could quickly flick through using the tabs, they've now put this across the top of the page, which makes things, again, much easier to navigate. So you also have the related tab. So the related tab is an interesting one because this is dynamic. It's not permanently set to a specific thing. This basically, when you're on a specific, in this case a lead, it's looking at what other entities are you likely to want to interact with. So I might want to look at activities, say. So if you'll notice, I've got related still, but it's also then added activities as a tab here. So any activities I now had against this lead would show up here. What you will also notice as well with the way the layout works is rather than have, like with the traditional sitemap where you'd have it split down into categories and then you'd have sub areas beneath that, so you'd have, this would be sales, this would be marketing, and then beneath that you'd have another load of buttons with different entities. Now it's much more simple. You don't have to navigate into an area just to then find what you're looking for, because you might not know where that is to start with, which reduces kind of the learning curve and makes it much easier for new users to pick up. So very quickly, what I want to do is show people what it used to look like, and then you can see the sort of the comparison to how it looks in the new world, as it were. So just wait for that. So notice that the way this used to work is this, for this specific example, I've only got the sales module installed, but I have to navigate to sales to then see all the different areas beneath it and how they're categorized. And you'll notice this just doesn't look as nice. It's a little bit more boxy, and again, there's quite a lot of sort of wasted space here. So I think personally, one of my favourite parts about all this is the lack of white space. Previously, there was in some respects poor utilisation of space, whereas now since this has been tidied up, you obviously can have a lot more fields on display at once. which makes it sort of much easier to quickly capture enough information rather than being concerned that you have too many fields on an entity. So while we're still on this page, I want to quickly take a look at the timeline in the center of the pane. So previously this was split down into 4 areas. So you had notes, you had activities, and then you had one for documents and potentially notes if you have the OneNote integration set up. Now we have the idea of a timeline. So this is basically put all of that different bits of information together. And now, every time you have any interaction with the customer, be that an activity such as a phone call, or you track an email, or notes, etc., all of them will just appear in one pane. There's no need to navigate between the tabs. And you can also filter this, which is one of the cool features. So the filtering means that rather than before where we could kind of categorize this into, is it a post, is it an activity? If I go into show more filters, we can look at types of activity. So was it a letter, phone call, whatever. And we can also sort this by date as well. So sometimes it was quite difficult if you have quite a lot of interactions with the customer. Say you've, the salesperson is trying to trawl through emails, but they don't want to look at all the case emails they've had. They just want to look at a specific bit of dialogue, but they know roughly when it was. They can then sort that by the date and then filter that down. So I can filter this activity. So I'm just going to be looking for emails, and see then it's just going to refresh and it's just going to filter that down. Part of the good things about the unified interface is the way that we can have sort of additional features and custom controls within that, which are not available to us on the old style application. So a good example here, for those who've noticed, I'm not going to talk about this for too long, but this is Sales Navigator. So LinkedIn Sales Navigator is designed to sort of help your teams find people on LinkedIn, make introductions, etc. And before this could be sort of set as almost like a subgrid on the account and contacts, but again it was quite difficult to sort of navigate, it was quite clunky, etc. Whereas now we can embed this as a custom control. So you'll notice that I've got Sales Navigator here. And essentially, the way it works is it will just look at the name and then look at the company name, basically, and try and match those people. So very quickly, just to show this in a little bit more detail, I'm going to flip across to someone who we know exists. So I'm going to have a look for Warren. So you notice he's come up as a contact. So with a contact, you'll see default, so you get a custom control for LinkedIn member profile. So I can see all this information being surfaced from Warren. So we have the connotation of icebreakers. So it looks at who I've got as shared connections. And then we've got a section called Get Introduced, which basically again is again looking at those connections that we have with each other, those shared connections, and then we can use the ask for introduction. So send them a message to say, could you please introduce us to Warren? And then if I flip across to the LinkedIn company profile, you'll notice that nothing's coming up because Warren hasn't got anything. But if I search Preact, so there we are, I can match this. So this is then matched. So it knows now that Warren is matched to that account. And then you'll see that it's got recommended leads. So I can set sales preferences. So the criteria would be maybe I'm looking for an IT manager in a specific area, working in a specific sector, potentially things like that. And then connections, again, this will show me anyone I'm connected with in this organization. And then we have the news as well. So any posts that are shared by the company in question will appear here. So they're designed that you can have a conversation about a prospect that you haven't really had much dealing with, and then you can find some common ground based on the articles they've been posting. So in terms of custom controls, there's a few other sort of custom controls that I'd like to show you. So a good one on here is this kind of custom control. So the idea of this is I can choose what the increment is, and I can very quickly sort of click plus or minus. And really, the best thing about all of these is if your sales guy's on the road, etc., and he wants to do something like this on the mobile client, it just makes it really easy to do. So if I'm going to quickly bring across my phone again onto the screen, so you notice we're on exactly the same record again. And I'll scroll down. So we've got type of inquiry. So we notice it's an ink one. So I click ink supplies. Again, that's nice, simple. This is like a nice little radial dial. So estimated value. So I think that this deal is going to bring in 25,000. And then how many print heads do they need? Well, I could leave this as 0, but again, I can very quickly add and remove. And this just makes it really, really easy for us to do. Because sometimes, when you're out on the road and you very need to quickly enter some information, it just makes it a little bit more user friendly, especially if you're using on a fairly sort of small scale screen. So talking about custom controls, I'm just going to quickly get rid of my phone again. Now, a really cool new feature, and this is sort of very new. You notice I've got these dials, but they're actually embedded in the business process flows. So for those of you who know, previously this couldn't be done, but then Microsoft on the latest release have just sort of added this functionality. So what you'll notice here is, again, I've popped this out, and I can still use all the custom controls within the interface in the popped out flyout. So what I'd like to talk about next a little bit is more on sort of the reporting capabilities of Dynamics and what that all looks like in the unified interface. So I'm going to just navigate to my home screen. Basically, with home screens, you can set any page within Dynamics to be your home screen on a personal level and a company-wide basis. So most people tend to opt for sort of reporting and dashboards as they go in. And this is kind of where I want to focus. So this is a Power BI dashboard, which is embedded within Dynamics. So Power BI is Microsoft's business intelligence tool. And what it does is it will do the same things as any kind of reporting engine, but you can plug this into multiple different data sources. So if you wanted to sort of cross-reference some information from maybe even like an Excel spreadsheet against some Dynamics data, you can then do all that in here and embed that natively. So I don't have to go to any other software. I don't even have to leave the screen. I can just see all the information that I need, but it's actually being surfaced out of Power BI. And the difference between Power BI, so you can see this is a nice Power BI chart. It's got various different types of graphs and charts on here. The difference really between this and the Dynamics ones is not only that you're not limited by space in the same way. So with the traditional Dynamics out of the box dashboards, you're limited to sort of 6 separate blocks, if you like, so 6 tables or 6 charts. Whereas with Power BI, you can have more than that. But it's also sort of what kind of things you can do with it. So if I show you this one, this just has an example of sort of a couple of heat maps on there. So maybe you want to look at your global distribution of customers, things like that. The nice thing about this is it's more of a one-stop shop. So rather than having to sort of navigate between multiple applications just to do my day-to-day job, the idea is this basically is all I need. It's also quite useful because you notice I've got things like open in Power BI. So if I wanted to edit this report, I can just click the link from here and it will go straight into Power BI. And I think this just sort of illustrates really how closely aligned Microsoft is in terms of its whole stack. So the integration with Office, things like Power BI, SharePoint, OneNote, Exchange, etc. is just sort of very, very seamless, which is something you don't see from a lot of applications. What I really want to show you quickly is PowerApps. So PowerApps is another area of the Microsoft stack, which is very sort of heavily integrated with Dynamics. And I first kind of want to show you how we create the model-driven applications that I made reference to earlier, so things like the Sales Hub. And then I want to show you how we can build custom PowerApps and embed those within Dynamics. So I'm just going to pull across the app designer. So when you're defining something like a sales hub, etc., you can basically drill down into the detail and decide exactly what forms, entities, etc., are visible on that model-driven application. So if I just pull this across, you notice. So this is where we would define everything. So you notice there's no coding. I don't have to write any script for this. This is really nice and easy. So what is the entity? What forms? So if we have multiple forms, I can define which forms we see. So you might say that actually we only display mobile forms for accounts. Again, views, charts, dashboards, etc., and even business process flows. You could make this so potentially your field team have a completely different interface and it's a very trimmed down version of the wider interface. Or essentially maybe you want to create a management hub as well as a sales hub. And again, you can just surface different bits of information and it's all really easy to define in here. This obviously also reduces how long it takes to physically make these applications. It really is nice and easy. So if I want to look at this, which dashboards do I want to be available for the Sales Hub? Well, actually, maybe I just want to remove one of these and say, actually, on the mobile, you can only see 2 dashboards. Using the Power Apps to build things like this makes it really nice and easy to tweak little things. So you can do these little customizations for site maps, for what people can see. And it just really helps you extend your Dynamics environment. But also you can create Power Apps for things outside of the Dynamics world, at least when it comes to sort of SharePoint, Office, etc. To continue on from this, I'm just going to go back to Dynamics. So close that, leave. Okay, fine. So the thing I want to show you is a Power App that we have developed in-house, which is actually an opportunity grid accelerator. So basically, when you're on an opportunity, a lot of the time it can be quite difficult if you've got lots of product lines, packages, etc., because it can take quite a long time to enter each one individually. So the standard interface controls basically force you to have to add one at a time, which can make things a tiny bit more difficult for some users. It completely depends on how your business works. So the way this works is it sits underneath opportunities. So if I just go onto an opportunity, so there we go, got an opportunity here. So on one of the tabs is product line items. So I'm going to navigate to this. It's not going to work because I haven't selected price list. So if I choose one of my price lists, so let's go for the UK price list. Just press the save button. There we go, it's just saving the record and just do a little refresh. There we go. Right, so if you notice, it fills my screen, but we can define exactly how big this is in terms of space, etc. So depending on what kind of size screens you use in your office, we can define that and you can manipulate that quite easily. And same with the actual how this all looks. You can use the Power App editor I was showing earlier to customize this, so you can define exactly how big the banner is, logo, etc. So into the Power App. Here I have my products. I can search my products, but I don't have too many in here, so I can select from here. So the idea is rather than having to go search for onset, press yes, put that across, search for spider, yes, put that across, etc. I can just select multiple. So right, I know that I'm actually going to need these 3 things. I added them across, pulls the value across, etc. It essentially puts them into like a basket. I then create these, so this is then going to create those as product lines. There we go. So you'll notice now I can edit the quantities, discount, etc. These are just some fields we've added, but it's very easy to sort of tailor this to your environment. We've even got a nice little calculated field down here, which is doing sort of a current total. But from the option, we can choose to add single products. So what the product is, it's an onset, what the unit is, so it's primary in this case, but if we had different unit types, price per unit, again we can manually discount this in here, and we then just create all these line items, and then you can notice how it's pulled these across automatically out of the Power App and into Dynamics, and it's now added us the total amount there. It's also worth noting that a lot of people will design Power Apps and then make them publicly available on the Power App Store. So a good example of this is there's a room booking app on there. So if you want to book a meeting room in the office, people have created a model-driven application which essentially looks at an exchange calendar and allows people to book a room. And it's stuff like that is really simple, and the whole community helps sort of drive that forwards. Quite a useful feature of Dynamics is something called the Relationship Assistant. So the Relationship Assistant is a tool that essentially comes from Microsoft's Embedded Intelligence Suite. So this has a little bit of AI in the background, which is basically analyzing actions. So a good example of this is if I go to an opportunity, say. So let's just find an opportunity. Okay, here's a good one. So this is one we've won. So the relationship assistant basically is going to be looking at various different things. So my conversation with Oliver, it said email requesting a meeting. So it is basically reading the information in the email and seeing what the email says. Does it have specific keywords? And then if it has those keywords, it then prompts actions based on that. So you notice email puts opportunity at risk. Well, it might be that they've said specific negative words like sorry, etc., and then that again is kind of prompting a response. Same as another good example is if we go on to a different one, potentially where I haven't spoken to them for some time. So let's have a look at this one. So you'll notice it says no activity. So it says there's no been activity on this account since the 24th of March. So again, we can use that to kind of prompt your users to do things with stuff. There's also capabilities now to take the simple sort of toast notifications from the relationship assistant a little bit further. So we now have Dynamics 365 AI for sales, which is a whole artificial intelligence piece which helps kind of advise you and guide you on the sales process. We also have the customer service AI, which again looks at cases and compiles sort of keywords and categorizes them. The artificial intelligence stuff is really quite new and quite cutting edge. So if you do have any sort of further questions on that, please do follow up with myself and Warren following the webinar. For those of you who are already familiar with Office, you'll know how Office profile cards work. So the idea is you can define your profile, and then when people are looking through emails and stuff, it will surface your picture and any sort of further information you've added to your profile card. So what I mean by this is if I just quickly flip over to mail. So this is the inquiry we got earlier. So if I hover over this, you'll notice that my profile card will come up. So LinkedIn, it's trying to basically match. And then it's got all the emails that I've sent, if I shared any files, etc. This is quite cool. So again, if the LinkedIn, I can click here and it will move onwards. So I'm not going to talk too much about how profiles work in general, but the reason I wanted to sort of show you that bit is again, if we go back to Dynamics, one of the best ways to show this is if I just do something simple like we'll go to create an activity. So subject, call about ink, and then call to. So I'm going to pick someone who I know. Some information, right? So we'll go for Warren. Now, what I can do is if I hover over Warren, you'll see it's pulled up his contact card information. So you'll notice it has the option here to send an email. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly pop this out even more so you can see. So we've got Warren. Where does he work? Again, this is defined as his profile. You notice that things like email address are highlighted in blue. So if I click this, it will automatically open my default mail client. And again, this works exactly the same with the phone number. I can choose to copy that with the button here, or if I click this, this will automatically use my default phone client. So if you're using Skype for Business, things like that, it just means you can very sort of quickly navigate and send things like that. That's all I'm going to cover on today's session. So I appreciate I went through things quite quickly there. So if you do have any questions following the presentation, please do drop myself or Warren an email. Our contact details will be in the end of the presentation. Back to you, Warren.
That's great. Many thanks, Simon. We hope you found this a useful overview and it's excited you about what can be achieved through the unified interface and how this creates an improved experience for users. We'll pick up your questions immediately after the presentation, but for a detailed discussion about how to enable this latest UI, please do get in touch with Preact. Enabling the unified interface should certainly be carefully planned to understand the impact of implementing this within a Dynamics environment and how best to utilize its capabilities. PreAct offers consultancy to support administrators through this process, as well as training on the management of the unified interface, so please do get in touch to find out more. We'll pause for just a few minutes before responding to the questions which have come through. But if you're leaving us at this point, on behalf of Simon and myself, many thanks for your time. We do hope you found this beneficial, and we look forward to seeing you on a future PreAct webinar soon.